Thursday, September 4th turns Forrester Creations into a pressure cooker. The kind where every closed door hums with an argument that hasn't happened yet and every open corridor feels like a witness stand. The newest developments in the bold and the beautiful make one point painfully clear. Time is up for evasions. Taylor Hayes wants a wedding date on paper. Now Eric Forrester is done pretending his son's heart belongs anywhere but with Brooke Logan. And Ridge Forrester is out of room to hide behind anyone's expectations, not his children's, not his father's, not even his own. The spark that ignites the day is Eric's last-minute move to block Ridge's sinful trip, a hasty escape that would have bought Ridge a few days of silence and nothing else. Eric cuts that off, or tries to, because he knows running solves nothing and honesty solves everything. He looks at his son and says what everyone tiptoes around. If Ridge wants Brooke, say it. If he wants Taylor, say it. But stop letting geography and impulse decide what courage should decide. With that prelude, the episode tilts into a series of confrontations that build like a drumline toward one demand: choose. Inside the design office, bolts of raw silk lean against the wall, sketches litter the drafting tables, and Thomas Forrester stands in the center of it all looking like a man who has misplaced both his compass and his map. He starts with small talk and ends with confession. He tells Ridge the engagement to Paris Buckingham is over and the silence that followed has been louder than any argument. He jokingly aunts about how even the hum of the sewing machines used to drown out doubt. Now there is no hum, only doubt. He admits he is unmoored at work because he isn't helming a named line, isn't fighting for a collection that carries his signature, isn't channeling his energy into a clear runway moment. He says the words that scare him. I feel alone. And then he says the words that scare Ridge. The one constant that still makes sense is you and Mom planning a wedding. He calls that reunion the one good thread in a tangle of frayed ends, the single bright stitch holding this family fabric together. If Ridge pulls it, what's left? Thomas doesn't threaten relapse. He doesn't have to. He talks about pattern show the absence of purpose becomes a vacuum, and how a vacuum pulls at old habits. He looks Ridge straight in the eyes and says, "Don't take my family from me. Don't take this from Mom. It's not blackmail. It's not manipulation dressed as vulnerability. It's pure vulnerability, and that's worse for Ridge. Because guilt born of truth is heavier than any tactic." He remembers every time Thomas climbed out of a bad season with the rope of family, and he asks himself if he can cut that rope now. The answer won't arrive in this room, so Ridge takes it upstairs to the only man who cuts through fog with a single sentence: Eric. The patriarch is waiting in the office that doubles as a museum of Forrester historia-word photographs, iconic gowns on mannequins. The piano that's heard more secrets than any therapist in Beverly Hills. Ridge starts with Thomas. He lists the breakup, the drift, the career malaise, the fear that an unmoored Thomas will reach for the worst version of himself if the wedding collapses. He confesses he's half convinced that staying the course with Taylor is a father's duty as much as a fiance's promise. Eric listens and then dismantles the argument in 3 blows. First, children are not anchors you tie to your ankle. They're sails you help learn the wind. Second, Steffi and Thomas do not get a vote in the ownership of your heart. They're delivered in that measured baritone that carries decades of earned 40-year woman has always been Brooke. He doesn't say it to provoke. He says it because Ridge has said it 1,000 times without the courage to act on it today. Eric's speech is not a nostalgia tour. It's a mandate. If Brooke is the truth, honor Taylor by not marrying her while wanting someone else. If Taylor is the truth, honor Brooke by closing that door completely. What Eric refuses to allow is a marriage staged as penance, a ceremony used to quiet a son's fear about a father's failure. He reminds Ridge what a Forrester vow is supposed to mean in a town where vows often last shorter than a fashion cycle. Ridge hears the verdict and still wrestles. Guilt roars. Habit argues. Memory tempts. But clarity is in the room now, and clarity is ruthless. It will not leave without an answer. Downstairs, the energy shifts. Taylor arrives, radiant but urgent, that combination of warmth and insistence that makes people underestimate how hard she can push when she believes she's right. She doesn't circle the subject. She lays out a timeline, pick a date this week, venue scouting by the weekend, invitations in the mail before the next board meeting. She calls it momentum. Everyone else will call it pressure, and neither label is wrong. She felt the tremor when Eric blocked Ridge's trip, and she reads tremors the way other people read road signs. She refuses to let hesitation become narrative. She speaks about a future framed in certainty, breakfast conversations that have nothing to do with scandal, holidays without a Logan versus Forrester seating chart, a home where their history stops being a reason to pause and starts being a reason to proceed. She invokes family in a way that is more hope than leverage, but it still lands like leverage because Ridge is carrying Thomas's plea in his pocket like a hot coal. Taylor doesn't threaten, doesn't weep. She presents a plan and asks for execution. Set the date. Put ink to paper. Plant a flag. Ridge gives her what he can in the moment: gratitude, affection, and a stall. He talks about the week being crowded, about vendor calendars, about wanting the kids involved, about needing a minute to align schedules. Taylor hears every dodge because she has spent a lifetime separating what Ridge says from what Ridge means, and she decides meaning requires a deadline. Tomorrow, she says softly but without room for argument, let's look at dates. No more floating. We deserve to start. The walls of Forrester Creations absorb this collision and bounce the shock into adjoining rooms. Steffi senses movement and braces for impact, ready to protect her mother from humiliation and her brother from collapse, ready to cast Brooke as the familiar saboteur if the narrative tilts that way. Brooke, on her end of the battlefield, doesn't storm the office or stage a speech. She lets Eric's counsel do the speaking, because she knows the only confession that matters must come from Ridge to Taylor, not Ridge to Brooke. Katie watches, pragmatic as ever, understanding that restraint is stronger than intrusion right now. Hope keeps to the studio, channeling anxiety into work, sketching silhouettes that look like choices, clean lines for certainty, shredded chiffon for doubt. The company itself feels the divide in small ways that add up: the way assistants phrase emails, the way publicists stockpile statements for either outcome, the way a single print ad can be read as Team Brooke in one light and Team Taylor in another. Through all of it, Eric remains the still point. He won't campaign, he won't grandstand. He will remind his son one more time if necessary that duty and devotion are not synonyms, and that a wedding meant to soothe a son's conscience will eventually tear a wife's heart. The episode threads these conversations without cutting to black for relief. It keeps Ridge in motion, from Thomas's confession to Eric's directive to Taylor's deadline, and back again to the quiet hall where the photographs of past runway triumphs look down like a jury. He is a man split between two right things that become wrong in combination. The camera favors close shots, those moments when he almost reaches for his phone, almost dials Brooke, almost tells Taylor the only truth that matters: I can't promise you a marriage if the promise starts with a lie, but almost doesn't finish the scene. Taylor returns a second time before the day ends, armed with practicalities that are also ultimatums. The chapel Steffi loves is free in 4 weeks. Carter can officiate. Finn and the kids can make the date. The Montecito property is available for a reception if they want air and stars instead of chandeliers. She has solved his excuses. All he has left is an answer. He tries to meet her exactness with generosity. He says she deserves a wedding surrounded by certainty, not speculation. He says he wants to enter it with the joy she is already holding. He asks for one night, only one, to line up everything in his heart with everything on the calendar. Taylor nods because she is kind, but kindness is not surrender. It is the last concession before a zero-tolerance policy. Tomorrow, she repeats and kisses his cheek like a signature on a contract. In the aftermath, Thomas reappears at the doorway, not to intrude but because hope makes us brave. He asks if there's a date. He says he's ready to help with whatever the family needs. It's venue decor, a bespoke gown that will make the world stop scrolling. He says he can pour his restless energy into making his Mother's Day perfect. Ridge hears the appeal underneath the offer. Give me something to build that isn't a lifeboat. He promises nothing specific and everything general, the way fathers do when they don't want to hurt their sons before they have to. Thomas accepts it like a ration and departs before his face betrays how starved he is for certainty. Night drops over the mansion and over the office and over the city that has watched these triangles for decades. Eric sits at his piano and touches a single chord, more prayer than music. Brooke stands at her window and refuses to rehearse a speech because the only words she wants are Ridge's, not hers. Taylor reviews venue photos with Steffi, and the joy is real because her love is real. Hope and pressure can live in the same chest, and today they do. Ridge wanders the hallway lined with the company's founding moments and thinks about legacy, and how legacy turns toxic the instant you confuse it with obligation. The episode doesn't stage a twist in the final minute. It stages an inevitability. Taylor will be back in the morning with calendars. Eric will repeat that love is a compass and guilt is a blindfold. Thomas will hover at the edge of every conversation like a siren and a warning. Steffi will keep score. Brooke will remain still. And Ridge will either write a date on Taylor's list or he will write a different kind of sentence. The end of one chapter so another can begin without theft. What Thursday makes unmistakable is the battlefield map. Taylor wants the wedding locked, and she will not be embarrassed into retreat. Thomas, stripped of Paris and starved of purpose, clasps the engagement like a life raft and begs his father not to sink it. Eric, serene and flinty in one breath, refuses to let his son barter a lifetime for a week of peace and says aloud the thing everyone else lowers their voice to say. Brooke is the truth Ridge has never successfully outrun. Ridge, for all his experience, now faces the most adult choice of his life. Not who he wants at midnight, not who he misses on a Tuesday, but who he can honor in front of a room when the music stops and the vows must stand up to silence. The hour ends without a ring exchange, or a swapped venue, or a shock cameo at the door. It ends with the sound of a calendar page turning and the promise that by the time it turns again, either there will be a date circled in ink or there will be a different circle, the clean. Hard of a no, spoken with compassion, but without retreat. Taylor's request is simple on paper and seismic in practice. Set the day. Eric's guidance is equally simple and equally seismic. Set it with the right woman, or don't set it at all. Thomas's plea is raw. Don't dismantle the one structure keeping me upright. And Ridge's answer to moral decide whether the bold and the beautiful spends the fall measuring tuxedos or rebuilding a family from the rubble of a brave decision. Until then, every hallway at Forrester feels like the aisle. Every conversation feels like speak now or forever hold your peace. And every character knows that peace bought with pretense is the most expensive piece of all. The hour opens like a pressure valve hissing in a silent room. Because Ridge Forrester finally puts into words what everyone around him has been reading in his eyes. He is worried about Thomas and Steffi. Worried about how fragile Thomas looks without a clear line to design and without Paris beside him. Worried about how fiercely Steffi protects every inch of Taylor's happiness and how that fierceness can turn into a cage. He admits it to Taylor first in a halting confession that mixes love with responsibility. And the second the words are out, Taylor pounces not unkindly, not manipulatively, but with a practiced urgency that sounds like a heartbeat in a hospital corridor. Then we end the doubt, she says, and the unspoken addendum lands as heavy as a signature. Set the date. As soon as possible. No more hesitations disguised as logistics. No more soft landings for the sake of his children's nerves. No more drawn-out engagements that turn into emotional hostage situations. Pick a chapel, pick a weekend, pick a Timido it now. She's a clinician writing orders in black ink. And Ridge feels the old reflex to soothe, to stall, to promise tomorrow without naming a day. But Eric steps between that instinct and the door. And when the patriarch speaks, it's with the cool iron of a man who has watched too many ceremonies begin with apologies and end with scars. He cuts through the smoke with one insistence. Do not let your children drive your vows. Thomas's anxiety is not a ring on your finger. Steffi's intensity is not a minister at the altar. A father can love his children without ceding the deed to his heart. Listen to yourself, Eric says, and the room hears the second clause even if he never says it aloud. Yourself, your history, your pulse when Brooke walks in the room. Eric does not soft-pedal the subtext. He names it with the confidence of someone who has collected decades of evidence. If Brooke is your truth, honor Taylor by refusing to marry her while you carry that truth. If Taylor is your truth, say it without wincing. Anything in between is a lie with flowers on it. The building hums with that declaration. Taylor's phone begins buzzing with messages from Steffi about venues. Thomas hovers at the threshold of every conversation with an offer to design the gown, the aisle, the sky itself if it will hold this union still. Brooke is nowhere and everywhere, the ghost in every framed memory on the office wall. And then the family meeting gets called pretext, set a date, reality, interrogate a future. They gather in the great room of the Forrester mansion with its polished floor and museum lighting, the place where happiness is staged and heartbreak is archived. On one side, Taylor and her children, steady, bright, determined to finalize what love has promised. On the other, Eric, Donna, Katie, Hope, and a conspicuous empty space where Brooke isn't supposed to be because the script says this is about calendars, not confessions. Carter stands near the mantel because someone has to keep decorum in a house where decorum can evaporate in a sentence. Ridge opens with gratitude, and Taylor wastes no breath. She presents a list even weekends, 3 chapels, 1 Montecito estate if they want a canopy of stars, and then she speaks a sentence that turns the air to glass. I want to be your wife within the week. Or I want the courtesy of the truth. The room doesn't breathe. It's a clean line, a fair line, a line that sets everyone free or pins everyone down. Before Ridge can answer, the front door opens and the story's gravitational center steps through it. Brooke? No theatrics, no white dress, no tears. She's calm in a darker palette, the color people wear when they intend to force the issue. She apologizes for the intrusion, thanks Taylor for her patience, and then places a small stack of items on the coffee table like exhibits in a case. The meeting morphs in an instant. It is no longer a calendar session. It is a hearing, a family tribunal, a living room courtroom where the words speak now or forever hold your peace become a subpoena. Exhibit a sketchbook page Ridge left on her kitchen counter after Italy, a line drawing of a gown titled Bridge Capri White. He never makes a titular pun unless he is working from feeling. And the page is dated 2 days after he returned, the ink still dark with intention. Exhibit B, a voicemail Ridge forgot to delete before he tried to run from it, the one where he starts to say, I'm coming by, and then corrects himself into I shouldn't, where you can hear the smile in his voice as he fails to hang up the second he says her name. Exhibit C, a medical-grade smartwatch export of his resting heart rate that Eric quietly pulled when he felt the need to turn hunch into proof specs mapped to Brooke's sightings. To her visits to the office, to that afternoon in the showroom when she laughed and Ridge looked away because looking was too much. Exhibit D, a travel alert from the simple trip Eric blocked at the last minute, a booking that takes Ridge to a coastline Brooke once called a refuge. None of this is scandalous in the tabloid sense. It is nuclear in the relational sense. They are not photos of kisses or hotel registries with false names. They are the anatomy of a man in love trying not to be. Taylor stares at the items like a surgeon staring at an x-ray that contains 2 realities, the image she hoped for and the one that will end a plan. Steffi calls it manipulation wrapped in stationery. Thomas calls it an ambush. Katie calls it honesty at last. Donna and Hope say nothing because Brooke doesn't need a chorus right now. Carter Bliss, the counselor in him, suggests everyone speak in turns. And so they do, like opening statements that feel like vows and cross-examinations that feel like breakups. Taylor begins with grace and spine. She acknowledges the history, the pull, the undeniable charge between Ridge and Brooke that looks like destiny when you want it and destabilization when you don't. But then she plants her flag. I am not the consolation prize for a man afraid to say yes to his own heart. If it's Brooke, say it and free me. If it's me, then let's stop pretending we're passengers on a train and be the engineers. Pick the date. This week, her eyes are clear, her voice is steady. There is no victim here, only a woman refusing to be collateral in a story that likes to swallow women whole. Eric follows, and his speech should ignite scandal, but instead it diffuses a mine. I won't let guilt deliver my son to a marriage he cannot sustain. No child of mine will wed out of fear for his children. I love you, Taylor, and I won't lie to you by staying silent while Ridge lies to himself. He looks at Ridge. You already know the answer. Man up and say it. Thomas surges with a reminder no one asked for and everyone expected. The last time Ridge shows Brooke. The debris field left Taylor rebuilding alongside two children who had to learn the word resilience before they learned the word rest. He tells his father he cannot survive another season of being held together with press releases and pride. He doesn't threaten relapse, he holds up reality. Steffi adds the corporate angle. Stability matters, the brand matters. The next collection cannot launch during a triangle that will rip through the boardroom like a hurricane. Help, when her turn arrives. Speaks softly and cuts clean. Stability doesn't come from a wedding. It comes from the truth people bring into it, and then the room waits for the only voice that matters. The man trapped between the woman who is his history and the woman who is his hope, and the irony that those titles can swap depending on where he stands. Ridge starts with Taylor's name, because she deserves that. He thanks her for seeing a future when he couldn't see past Thursday. He admits the fear he shaped into a schedule, the father's instinct he tried to counterfeit into a fiance's resolve. He then turns to Brooke and the oxygen changes. He does not offer poetry, he doesn't know how right now. He offers the one sentence that detonates both sets of plans. I haven't stopped loving you. And I don't know how to marry someone else with that inside me. The room explodes. But it's a quiet explosion, the kind where everyone is too stunned for chaos. Taylor inhales and turns that inhale into strategy so quickly you can almost see the decision flash across her face. Here is the twist. Eric, who thought he was simply telling his son to be brave, has pushed Ridge toward Brooke faster than even he intended, and Taylor refuses to let that nudge become a freefall. She does not crumble, she pivots. Defense becomes offense in a single line. 7 days. There is no tremor in it. I will not be a bride in waiting while you rehearse old feelings. I will be a bride in 7 days or I will not be a bride at all. It is not a tantrum. It is a declaration of sovereignty. And with that, the meeting becomes a calendar again, but the kind of calendar that starts wars. Taylor outlines a mini-campaign that sounds like a military operation disguised as romance. Day 1 fittings, Day 2 venue lock, Day 3 licensing, Day 4 final vows meeting, Day 5 rehearsal. Day 6 family dinner with rules of engagement, Day 7 ceremony at sunset where she says I do only if his eyes do not slide toward the doorway in case Brooke walks in. She invites Steffi to captain logistics, Thomas to design the gown dress that will not beg history for permission and Finn to keep the family's nerves oxygenated. She tells Carter to be ready to officiate or to file the cleanest possible dissolution of engagement if it comes to that. And then and this is the shot heard round Beverly Hills invites Brooke to attend as a guest, not as a saboteur, because nothing exposes a lie like proximity to the truth. Brooke doesn't flinch. She says she will come if invited, and the steadiness in her voice frightens the room more than any speech could have. Because nothing about her reads as a woman playing to win at any cost. She looks like a woman who knows time and gravity do most of the work when a compass is already set. Eric, catching himself in the mirror of this new reality, realizes he just accelerated the outcome he wanted, and he wears the oddest expression, relief shaded with guilt. He has no interest in humiliating Taylor, respects her to muck, but he has every interest in sparing her the slow bleed of a marriage built on half-truths. He pulls Ridge aside for one last whisper that is both benediction and dare. 7 days is not a trap. It's a mirror. Look in it. Thomas takes the 7-day war as a mandate to create a masterpiece. He pours his restless energy into muslin and beadwork, sketching a silhouette that only his mother could wear. cutting a bodice that honors the years she held her family without asking for applause. Every stitch is a prayer and a dare. Choose her. Steffi turns the office into a command center, whiteboards filled with vendor names, contingency plans, PR strategies to shield the company if the wedding becomes a spectacle. She drafts a statement that says love is a private matter even when it isn't, and she stockpiles a second statement that says the same thing with different punctuation if the wedding collapses. Finn becomes a buffer and a barometer, checking pulse rates and reminding everyone to hydrate and breathe. A doctor managing a patient named Forrester Creations as it undergoes elective heart surgery. Katie and Donna flit through like diplomats, preventing skirmishes in hallways and gently shutting doors when words need privacy. Hope designs a capsule collection called Decisions, 6 looks that read like sentences. Yes, no, not yet, not this way, not anymore, I still will. The press smells the story and plants camp chairs at the estate gates. Bloggers build countdown clocks labeled Bride in 7 days. Fan pages split into sunlit collages of Taylor's calm and moody edits of Brooke's laughter. Celeb sites whisper about last-minute venue holds and couture rush jobs. But inside the house the noise goes dim every time Ridge walks past the piano Eric plays when he needs to remember what love sounds like when no one is watching. At night, the house is quieter than it has any right to be. Taylor stands before a mirror in a simple slip while Thomas marks him length with pins, and for a moment mother and son say nothing because the only thing to say would either wound or beg. Across town, Brooke sifts through the exhibits she placed on the table and wonders if she has done enough, or too much, or exactly the right amount. She deletes a text she will not send. I'm not asking you to choose me. I'm asking you to choose right because the truth doesn't need her marketing. Eric nurses a single scotch and the piano's middle C, repeating it like a heartbeat. Rich sits in his studio with a blank page that refuses to stay blank. His hand moves and draws a neckline he first sketched years ago when he thought forever was a simple shape. He hears Taylor's 7-day vow like a drum. He hears Brooke's silence like a hymn. He hears Thomas's plea like an alarm and Steffi's caution like a storm forecast. And he hears his father's voice, the one that cuts through the sound of all other voices because it feels like home. Do not marry for anyone else's peace. Marry for the truth. Day 1 of the countdown lands like a starting pistol. The company moves. The families move. The city pays attention, but the court never shifts. A father telling a son to stop letting his children shape his vows. A mother refusing to be a waiting room. A woman with evidence that reads like a pulse chart. And a man who now understands that indecision is its own decision that always hurts the person who deserves it least. The family meeting turned trial leaves wreckage and clarity in equal measure. Taylor's date is on the calendar in fresh ink. Brooke's exhibits are in everyone's heads like a second invitation. Eric's intervention has done precisely what interventions are meant to do even when they draw blood. It has forced a reckoning. And the twist does not end with the 7-day announcement. It deepens with the way Taylor steps into the offensive with grace sharp enough to cut. This is not a race to beat Brooke, she tells Steffi when the daughter's protective instincts flare. This is a race to meet my own standard. I marry a man who chooses me without blinking. If he blinks, we cancel mid-aisle. It is the most loving threat a woman can deliver to herself, a promise to walk away clean rather than live dirty. Brooke responds not with counter-programming, but with stillness that feels like strategy, because patience here is not passivity, it's proof. Eric refuses to weaponize his blessing. He simply refuses to hide it. Ridge carries the weight of a week like a crown of paper that will either dissolve in rain or survive the weather. And Thomas, in the quiet hour before dawn, finished pasting the sleeve, steps back from the dress form, and whispers to the empty room. Please. The War of the Bride in 7 days is not a spectacle of screaming. It is a choreography of conviction. Every character moves toward the same stage with a different prayer. By the time the 7th sunrise burns through the glass of the Forrester mansion, either Ridge will be standing before Carter with Taylor's hands in his, having laid every ghost to rest and chosen a present tense love without a backward glance, or he will break a pattern the only way patterns ever break publicly, painfully. Cleanly and walk toward Brooke not as a man fleeing a deadline, but as a man answering the only question that has ever mattered in this house, who do you love when no one is watching? The verdict started forming the day Eric said out loud what everyone else said in whispers, and Taylor refused to be the soft landing for a hard truth. The hearing convened when Brooke set her exhibits on the coffee table and the living room turned into a courtroom. The twist snapped into place when Eric's push became a shove and his shove became the exact acceleration he wanted, which turned Taylor from defense to offense and lit the fuse on a 7-day campaign with the elegance of a runway on the stakes of a war. The rest is logistics and oxygen and the awful, exquisite quiet that comes before a vow, because in this family, vows are the only plot twist that actually sticks.